Europe in 1936.
Wir im fernen Vaterland geboren, nahmen nicht als harten Herzen mit. Doch wir haben
For two generations, the Spanish Civil War has been remembered for the international brigades. This fighting force of 40,000 men was a unique expression of international solidarity. There were Frenchmen, Greeks, Poles, Italians, Americans, Canadians, Irish, Czechs, Australians, Swedes, Swiss. There were 2,000 British. 500 of them died. But the war was already 4 months old, and Madrid under siege by the time the first organized volunteers arrived in the city to take up positions at the front. One of the first battalions was predominantly German. It was named after Ernst Thälmann, the leader of the German Communist Party, who was in a Nazi concentration camp at the time. With a background of military service, a life of resistance to persecution that bred political discipline, not all Republicans were so happy about the volunteers. In Catalonia, some anarchists feared their revolution was being taken over by communists. They arrested a party of international brigaders arriving from France. But in Madrid, everyone was grateful for any relief from the enemy. The international brigaders were rushed up to the front to help their Spanish allies resist the rebel army attack. There was fighting in the Casa del Campo, a park on the western edge of the city. On November 15, 1936, the rebels finally broke through Madrid's defenses at a point in the university campus overlooking the park. The international brigades held the line in the philosophy faculty, but 2 days later the rebels attacked again and occupied part of the clinical hospital. The Thälmann battalion found themselves defending one floor of the hospital from the Moors on the floor below. Eventually the line stabilized, and Madrid held out. So Franco tried a new tactic. The Civil War became a testing ground for modern weapons. It was a foretaste of what was to happen a few years later in London, Hamburg, Tokyo, and Leningrad. But until now, no city in history had been so sorely tested. Scenes like this, on newsreels all over the world, confirmed the sympathy that attracted so many people to the Republic. Journalists like Ernest Hemingway went to report and became propagandists. The original complex Spanish causes of the war were distilled into the poetic certainties of right and wrong. Wogan Phillips, now the only communist in the British House of Lords, went to drive an ambulance. The threat of fascism had turned a generation of English intellectuals into communists. The brutal realities of Stalin's Soviet Union had not yet been made known. Some people like George Orwell, however, who had gone enthusiastically to fight for the Spanish Republic, came to appreciate in Spain the danger of all-pervasive totalitarian communism. He joined the anti-Stalinist party, the POUM. The persecution of the POUM by the official communists disillusioned many who thought the Republic was a democracy. Most volunteers, though, were communists, and those who weren't felt isolated. But for many Spaniards, the Soviet Union's support seemed a salvation. This comradely solidarity had a hard business edge. All the arms were paid for. Spanish gold reserves had been sent to the Soviet Union. They supplied the arms. Political influence came with them. In Madrid, morale was sustained by showing epic Soviet films like Kronstadt, celebrating the defense of the Soviet Revolution of 20 years earlier. But the Soviet influence was not revolutionary in Spanish terms. On the contrary, the Communist Party's disciplined approach to fighting the war and keeping order attracted large sections of the middle classes in the Republican zone. They had been frightened by the rival anarchist revolutionary ambition for the Republic. At the end of 1936, Stalin wrote to Largo Caballero and argued in diplomatic French that the Republic should collaborate with liberals and conservative peasants. It is necessary to prevent the enemies of Spain considering her a communist republic, he said. Stalin, remember, still needed Britain and France on his side. They were still not his certain allies against the threat of Hitler. And in Spain, Hitler's intentions were becoming clear. His ambassador formally recognized the Franco regime during the Battle for Madrid, and now Hitler could hardly afford to let the rebels lose. Germany increased its aid and sent instructors to train nationalist officers. This gave Franco's rebels a useful but still not decisive advantage. The nationalists were holding about 60% of Spain, but they were short of troops and had stalled on a front of 1,200 miles. In spite of a dangerous bulge around Madrid, the Republic was holding its ground. The nationalist sponsors became impatient, particularly Mussolini. Without even consulting Franco, he began to send large numbers of Italian volunteers to Spain. Their first battle was at Malaga. It was an easy victory. It shortened the front and raised nationalist morale. The nationalists now tried to encircle Madrid, first from the south by crossing the Jarama Valley. Republican reinforcements, including international brigaders, were rushed up to the front line. After 10 days, the battle had spent itself, with heavy losses on both sides. There immediately followed another attempt to encircle Madrid, this time from the north at Guadalajara. The Italians, supremely confident after their victory at Malaga, persuaded Franco to let them fight alone. On the Republican side, the Italians from the Garibaldi battalion of the International Brigades took up position against their fellow countrymen. When the Republican troops routed the Italian opposition, Mussolini was furious. He decided that no Italian could return home until they'd won a victory. Foreign aid on both sides poured into Spain at a faster rate than ever before, but it was not enough to clinch the war, only to prolong it. And Madrid was now a stalemate. It remained so until the end of the war, 2 years later. So the nationalists switched their offensive to the north. The western part of the Basque country was still Republican. It had been separated from the main Republican zone since the early days of the war. This northern region was a potentially valuable prize on account of its heavy industry and mineral wealth. It was a special region in other ways. Here conservatives were fighting side by side with anarchists and socialists. The Basques gave the lie to Franco's claim that his campaign was a Christian crusade. The region is the most devout Catholic area in the country. Here people prayed for victory against the nationalists. Their opposition to Franco and support for the Republic came from the traditional Basque yearning for the home rule of their region, so distinctive from the rest of Spain. The Liberal Republic recognized that ambition, but the nationalists who believed in the unity of Spain were determined to crush it. The attack began on March 31st. The nationalist General Mola threatened to raze the region to the ground. He nearly succeeded. But first the nationalists tried to starve the Basques into submission. The sea blockade of Republican ports posed an embarrassing problem for Britain. Several British merchant ships, legally commissioned to deliver food supplies to the Republic, were stuck in the French port of Saint-Jean-de-Luz. The British government was reluctant to challenge Franco's navy by supplying escorts for their merchantmen. Despite outcry from the House of Commons, Eden announced that British ships would be protected only outside a 3-mile limit of Bilbao. At the same time, the British were secretly negotiating with the nationalists for the output of British-owned mines in Spain. On April 19, 1937, a Captain Roberts, the master of one of those ships, the Seven Seas Prey, became anxious to leave Saint-Jean-de-Luz before his cargo rotted. Captain Roberts defied the British order and set sail for Bilbao. In spite of the warnings of the British government and the threats that Bilbao harbour had been mined by the nationalists, the Seven Seas Spray arrived unscathed and sailed up Bilbao River. Captain Roberts and Fifi became the Basque people's heroes. The Seven Seas Spray had exposed the nationalist blockade as a myth, and other British merchant ships followed with food supplies. But the Basques couldn't celebrate for long. "10 miles behind the front line was the small market town of Guernica, with a population of 7,000. It was the historic centre of Basque nationalism. The tree of Guernica, the symbol of Basque freedom, stood beside the Parliament building where traditionally all Spanish monarchs had sworn to uphold Basque liberties. April 26, 1937, was market day. 43 aircraft, mainly German, took part in wave after wave of attacks on the small town. The Condor Legion might have believed the Catholic Basques were communists, but the Spanish High Command who ordered the attack knew otherwise. For both of them, Guernica's cultural significance was more or less irrelevant. It was a military target. There was a small arms factory. And Republican soldiers retreating from the nationalist attack had to pass through the town to reach the last line of defense round Bilbao. The Germans claimed their instructions were to bomb the bridge and crossroads at the edge of Guernica in order to make the road to Bilbao impassable. In 3 hours, 100,000 pounds of incendiary, high explosive, and shrapnel bombs were dropped on the town. Little remained standing, except the arms factory and the Germans' main target, the bridge. The Germans' excuses don't explain why they did not use accurate Stuka dive bombers to destroy their objective, the bridge at the edge of Guernica, nor the fact that they machine-gunned the fleeing population, nor the magnitude of the whole operation. 72 hours after the raid, before the reckoning of destruction could be completed, the rebel army arrived at Guernica. They immediately began a propaganda offensive as well, making show of guarding the famous Bast Tree of Liberty. They even tried to put the blame on the Basques for destroying their own town.
Cierta prensa aseguró que esta desgraciada ciudad fue destruida por la aviación nacionalista. La trabación de hierro del frontón y los bidones de gasolina acumulados frente a la iglesia demuestran que fueron patrullas de incendiarios quienes echaron sobre sus hombros la tristísima misión de arrasar la pintoresca cuna del fuerismo vasco.
Some people were even prepared to believe this. The nationalists' real prize lay ahead. To protect their rich industries, the Basques had built a defensive wall around Bilbao, a ring of iron. But it could not protect the city from intensive bombing. With Bilbao about to fall, the Western democracies finally felt free to help. The children of Republican Spain were catalogued, given medical inspections, labeled and transported to England, France, Belgium, America, and the Soviet Union. Franco soon broke through Bilbao's defences and seized the region's industries and mines intact. Soon ships left Bilbao with new cargoes. Soon Franco was exporting iron ore. His clients included Germany and Britain. Both countries were to use the captured resources of the Republic for their own rearmament program. Non-intervention, either real or phony, didn't interfere much with business or prevent the world war that was to follow.